Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. Going to preview the 49er game against the Seahawks Thursday night football tomorrow. And shapes up to be the game of the year for both teams, I think. 49ers come in at 2-3. They're desperate for a win after falling to the Cardinals at home last week. And the Seahawks fell to the Giants, and both teams kind of are looking to get right. 49ers are in Seattle. So, Keith, at the beginning of the year, we felt somewhat confident that we might take one of two division games against this team, having dropped 5 in a row coming into this year. How do you feel now that the season is starting to play out and we're seeing what both teams look like?
I'm feeling about the same. The Seahawks started out really good, but have come back down to earth the last couple of weeks, and the 49ers have stumbled a bit and have lost a lot of their star players to injury, and they have not looked good defensively. They have looked good offensively, but not defensively, and they've stumbled to a 2-3 record and have looked very mortal. Honestly, I think the teams look fairly evenly matched, and I think Seattle could easily could pick up a win here this week. They definitely should get one of these.
I'm hoping for this win, man, right now. The team could use it to kind of turn this thing around. They've dropped a couple in a row that if they played to their fullest strength and played to their capabilities, I think both of those wins could have been had. That game against the Lions was going to be tough, but anything close to resembling the defense that showed up in the first 3 weeks, I think we could have got that game. Same thing for the Giants. So 49ers injuries, you mentioned injuries. They lost their kicker, at least for the next few weeks, with a high ankle sprain, Jake Moody. So they were out shopping for a kicker this week as well to add to their situation. So we'll see how that comes into play in this game. They are thin at defensive tackle. Jordan Elliott is out with a knee. Linebacker Demetrius Flanagan Fowles is out with a calf, and Hafanga is out with a wrist. Shavarius Ward, it looks like, is probably going to miss this game as well. For the Seahawks.
Well, before we jump to the Seahawks, it should also be noted that Jason Hargrave is on injured reserve. Currently, yes. Christian McCaffrey, their star running back, probably their most talented offensive player, or maybe Deebo Samuel would fit that description, depending on which way you want to look at it. He's on injured reserve. As is Elijah Mitchell, one of his backups. And then Ricky Pearsall is out, and so is Dre Greenlaw. Their star middle linebacker is still not in uniform because of his injury late last year. So, there's definitely been some attrition that's happened here for the 49ers.
Yeah, and it was always going to be kind of tough for them to get back. I think their defense took a little bit of a hit this year anyway. You add those things to the list. And it's funny you said the teams are about even. They've got quite a long list to get the Seahawks even close to being even.
Seahawks are pretty dang injured as well. So
yeah, McDonald did sound like he'd have both Hall and Mafe in this game, which is a great thing. Uchenna Nwasu did go on IR for at least 4 games. Byron Murphy's still going to be out, although he's not on IR. He's going to miss his 3rd straight game. Reek Woolen is going to be out of this game.
An ankle injury.
And so, yeah, like you said, it sounds like there's going to be a trade-off with injuries, and there's going to be no excuse, I don't think, for the Seahawks to be missing who they're missing and have that impact the game, especially when you consider those missing players on the other side too. So it's interesting that you said things really haven't changed as far as your outlook is concerned. You thought they'd still get one of these next two against the 49ers. The stakes are as high as they get this early in the season, though, for this game, for both teams. Tell me why you think Seattle should win this game.
I mean, Thursday night games are weird in that there's not a lot of time. There's no practice and there's very little game planning that happens. It's more of a, you have a chance to kind of reset and play to your own strengths and figure out what you're going to do based on what you do best. And it typically benefits the home team because they get an extra day or at least an extra half day of rest and prep, whereas the other team's traveling. And I think that helps. And I think it's just one of those things where you're at home. It's a night game, so the place is going to be rocking. And without a lot of game planning, it's a matter of just lining up and doing what you do well. And for the Seahawks, it lines up, what they do well lines up with needing to shut down what San Francisco does. And I just think that overall it's a matchup thing that I like Seattle's chances in this game, given kind of the way everything lines up.
Well, San Francisco does a couple things well, and on offense, they run the ball well and they pass the ball well. So their offense is top 10. There's no question, top 5 probably. Purdy's been getting the ball out. I think they're number 1 or number 2 in the NFL right now in yards per game on the passing side, and then run game they're averaging about 145 yards a game.
So there's that. I get there's a lot of yards there, but they've only scored 4 points more than Seattle on the
They've
year.
been struggling in the red zone,
yeah,
which is the key for them.
So they have been putting up a lot of yards, but they've only scored 4 more points than Seattle. In terms of points per game, the teams are essentially equal. And so, yeah, I mean, are they really a great offense if they can't put the ball in the end zone and score points?
They're ranked 29th right now in red zone offense.
Yeah.
Which is unlike them, uncharacteristically like them. They are ranked 10th in points, so they're still top 10 as far as the scoring team is concerned. Number 2 in yards overall, number 2 in yards per play. They still can do a lot of damage.
Oh, absolutely, they can. I just think that you look at this is where Christian McCaffrey's loss hurts them a lot because he had a nose for the end zone. He had a way of finding that little crease and getting past the goal line. And they've missed him. They've missed that quite a bit. His ability to get them 7 instead of 3 is something that they've been without. And I don't see a great answer for them on their roster at the moment.
So there's a couple of things that Seattle could do on defense that would help me feel a lot better in this game. One would be to stop the run and do better at tackling. And then 2 is getting some pressure from their pass rush. Now having both Boye Mafe back and Hall return in this game, I think will have a nice impact on that. Yep. Their offensive line is still pretty good. In fact, Purdy averages half a second longer to be able to get rid of the ball than Geno Smith does. So his line is giving him the protection that Geno doesn't have. So that's one thing that we could do to impact that, because when he is pressured, he is severely impacted in his ability to his completion percentage goes way down, and his inaccuracy, his propensity to turn the ball over goes way up as well.
Well, I mean, that's true for any quarterback. And it's just one of those things. They have a very good offensive line. And so it makes their quarterback look good. I mean, that's just the nature of the NFL. The Seahawks don't have a good offensive line, and it makes Geno look frustrating. You switch places with that. If you put Brock Purdy behind Seattle's offensive line, I don't know if you see him as being the superstar that the league kind of views him as right now.
I totally agree. There's a time to throw in a pressure to sack ratio chart that was just out today. And Geno Smith is both below average time to throw and more pressure. And Brock Purdy's off the chart on the far end where he gets the most time to throw and the least pressure. Yep.
And Geno has the fewest, not the lowest, but pretty close. It's very little time to throw and a lot of pressure. And the fact that he's put up the stats that he has this year and put up the yards and all of that, despite just abysmal play by the offensive line, is a testament to just how well he's playing. I think you put him behind a line like San Francisco's and people would be talking MVP type numbers because that's how good their offensive line's been. And so Seattle's got to find a way to get pressure. They've got to find a way to get Brock Purdy off his spot.
I agree. And they also need to slow down their running game. Now their running back has been pretty successful. They're seventh in rushing overall at 144 yards per game. I realize that some of those are empty yards and trying to come back yards, but Jordan Mason is second in the league with 536 yards rushing, which is more than the entire Seahawks offense, including Geno Smith scrambling.
And one of their backups is Isaac Guerrero, who you and I both liked in the draft process.
Nice little speedy guy.
The guy's got some wheels.
So talk to me about how you feel about why the Niners dropped games against the Rams and the Cardinals. So they had 10-point fourth quarter leads in both games and allowed both teams to come back and beat them. And the Cardinals at their home field was really a tough blow for them. Like internally, they did not like that loss last weekend.
They shouldn't like that. Yeah, but last week, I mean that loss was gutting, and
it left them desperate in a desperate sort of a feeling. Like John Lynch came out and said on playing the Seahawks on Thursday night, he said a must win ultimately means if you lose, you're out. So this is not that, but you go 0-3 in your own division, and that's not good. We've dominated our division of late, but this is a new season and we haven't done that. The stakes are high. We got to go see what we're made of. And I think Seattle could have the same headline.
Yeah. What you look at in both of those games is that San Francisco played pretty well for most of the game and had a lead. But their defense is suspect. And late in games, when teams went to more 2-minute drill kind of stuff where you stop the rotation and you keep the defense very vanilla, and they were able to just pick apart San Francisco's scheme and march down the field and score. And then it got to a point, it's like, okay, so now they've scored. You've got the lead still and the ball. Run the clock, like you get the first downs you need, run the clock and win this.
Connor had 76 yards in the second half against them.
Yeah. They couldn't do that. And so then they gave the ball back and Connor getting 76 yards and a half against San Francisco. I mean, that defense used to be, you could not run against them.
Well, and they were up 10. And the Cardinals still continued to commit to running the ball, which is, I think,
that'll tell you a lot
strategy.
Of what Seattle's going to have to do.
Yeah,
they need to run the ball. The whole was it 7 called runs in last week's game was just absurd, and they can't do that. this is a team that you can run against, and they need to be able to establish their run, keep their own defense off the field, grind out some yards, take advantage of that, because if you're going to beat San Francisco, you've got to put some drives together. And you can't just depend on, a big play. You've got to actually string some plays together and create some, get some yards. And they can do that. This is a team that we've seen them do that. We saw them do that against Denver, and we saw them do that, at times against, New England, where they can run the ball if they commit to it. And then they can play action pass and throw and stuff off of that. But they have this tendency to get away from the run and want to just go throw happy. And I don't think that's a way to win against the 49ers.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned the defense being a little suspect, and that's great news for Seattle's offense, because the last, I think it's either 4 or 5 games, we've averaged 16 points on our offense against their defense.
Their defense has been, that whole roster has been stacked for the last few years. So so
if you take Seattle's, average defense, and if you go look at statistically, even adding the last 2 games, we're still a top 20 defense, and top 10 still in a few different categories. Mm-hmm. They have an opportunity to kind of stay on pace with San Francisco for the first time in a while. And, you go take a look at Mike McDonald's defenses, and it looks like we might have a year to go before he's got really that thing kind of locked in. But his teams have been able to figure out both the Rams and the 49ers. And any little help, I think, can finally allow Seattle to be competitive in these conference games. And we're going to find that out.
The fact that the 49ers lost to the Rams and the Cardinals is concerning for them. It better be. Not just that they've lost games, but that they've lost games against teams with really bad defenses. Both of those teams defensively are not good at all, especially the Rams. And for the 49ers, they have a good offense, right? They have all of the yards. They're top 2 in total offense. And you're playing against the worst defenses in the league, and you're still losing games like that. What's going to happen when they have to play good defensive teams? Because like Seattle played New England, and if you've watched any of New England all season, they may not be the most talented team, but that defense flies around and makes plays and doesn't give up a lot of yards or points. They have not played bad defenses like the Rams and the Cardinals. So I would be worried if I was in San Francisco, because sure, you look number 2, whatever, but you're losing games against bad teams, and you're playing a lot of bad defenses, which is making those offensive stats look better than they probably should be.
One player that does still stand out for them, other than Purdy, and Purdy's having a decent season, although he threw 2 interceptions last week against 1 touchdown. But Brandon Ayuk finally, he basically doubled his stats last game: 8 receptions, 147 yards, out of the 244 that Brock Purdy had. Mm-hmm. So he's going to be the key cog there. Even though you're going to take a look at Samuel, you're going to take a look at Juwan Jennings, who's probably going to go up against our best corner in this game. And we also need to figure out a way to slow down Jordan Mason and not allow him to get some chunk plays. Last week he had 14 carries, 89 yards, which is a pretty decent, 4.8 average. How do we do all that, Keith?
Well, it's a lot, but honestly, they need to play a lot more disciplined defensively than they did this last week. I mean, they were going back and actually looking at the tape, which I couldn't do before our last show, but was able to do some of this morning. It was amazing how many just guys getting in coverage just flat-footed and waiting way too long to react to the route, and linebackers running themselves out of position. The lack of discipline in terms of what was going on was it was frustrating. It was frustrating to watch that tape.
So Mike McDonald kind of spoke to that as far as the run game. Now, Seattle last year was 31st against the run and 30th in 2021. This season, they ranked 20th at 128 yards per game, which is down about 35 yards on average per game so far. Mike said the principles of what we believe in the run game are staying square at the point of attack, all 11 guys setting the edge, knocking them back inside out, and then making the tackle. You have to be able to leverage the football. He continued, we're not leveraging the ball well on the second level as we need to be. I think for the most part, our interior guys are fighting their tails off. The second level run fits right now, we're falling short.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. Having watched this, I mean, that's really like the guys in the middle. He's talking about Leonard Williams and Jerron Reed mostly. Those guys they're doing their jobs, right? They're making it so that way there's not huge running lanes for the running back, and they're fighting hard against sometimes, against double teams to try and hold their ground and all of that. But the linebackers need to flow up into the hole and make that tackle, closer to the line of scrimmage. And there's a lot of guys running up into the wrong gap, or waiting for the play to come to them instead of running downhill and meeting
Keith,
the running back.
We saw a little bit of that last year. Undisciplined, assignment poor, and just not playing together and communicating.
By last year, you mean the last 4 years?
Right. Well, what makes this situation any different?
Well, I think what makes this situation different is that you've got a more competent coaching staff. These guys need to trust their coaches and do what's assigned. And because honestly, if the guys that stopped listening to Clint Hurt had reason to stop listening to Clint Hurt. I mean, it ended up making the defense worse because they stopped, but it's not like that was a well-coached defense last year. It wasn't schemed well. It wasn't coached well. And that was the problem. But now you've got guys at the top who know what the hell they're doing. And there shouldn't be freelancing. Guys got to step in and know their role, make their read, get into the right gap. And I don't know what the cause is because it's different players. Now, part of it is that you've got guys, Baker doesn't get a lot of practice time because of his injuries, and that's probably not helping. Dotson flies around and makes a lot of plays, but he also runs himself out of plays at times because he's almost playing too fast. Tyrese Knight was one of the guy that's supposed to be this tackle machine. And, he has at times run himself out of plays, and then he didn't get a chance to even play this last week. And that, I think he might've actually made a difference, simply because he is a tackling machine. He's a guy that gets up into holes and makes tackles, and they needed him, in that last game. But this is a case where they miss guys like Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner, against the run. Those guys were fantastic. They came up, made their reads, got into holes, met people at the line of scrimmage and made tackles. So
last year, the weaknesses were along the defensive line. This year, they're in the second level.
They are in the second level.
So turning this around, to the offense, to be successful, we are going to need to run the ball. And we've already talked about that. Grubb has acknowledged that. We also need the offensive line to play well and protect against the defensive front that the 49ers are going to throw. Geno was sacked 7 times last game.
That can't continue.
And
I mean, it's a good pass
and the Giants
rush
only blitzed on 22% of their of the dropbacks.
Yeah, why would you blitz if you don't need to? And they definitely didn't need to. But that's a really talented pass rush that the Giants have. But it was
every defense has a really talented pass rush at this level. Anymore. We always talk about every team has got but it's not a trio.
But yeah, see, that team was the Giants aren't one guy, right? They've got a solid trio of guys and a nice supporting cast to kind of just help make sure that you can't double team everyone. The 49ers typically have that. And if Hargrave was playing, they would definitely have that. But a lot of it is Bosa right now. You're looking at Bosa and going, that dude's got to make a bunch of plays for this defense because they're just not getting much else from anyone.
Agreed.
And when it's one guy, you can game plan around that. You can double team him on every play because the other guys aren't going to beat you. Now with Seattle's offensive line, those other guys may beat you because the offensive line's that bad, but you have to account for Bosa. He is such a good player. You got to account for him. You got to double team him. If you're only going to have one person on him, you got to have him back to chip him and cut his momentum. So that way he can't just get around you can't, if you're leaving Stone Forsythe one-on-one against Bosa, over and over again, he's going to lose the Forsythe is going to lose that battle and you're going to get your quarterback killed. Like they need to have a better plan than that.
So let's talk strategy. Let's talk offensive strategy for a minute. We know that both Grubb and McDonald have essentially pledged to run the ball more, to get those guys going more. At a minimum, Walker needs to have at least 15 touches in a game to be anywhere near effective. And absolutely. Charbonnet at least, 6 to 8, 10 maybe. And ideally that would be the case. And you're converting third downs, you've converting your red zone opportunities and so forth. You got a much more balanced attack. I think right now Seattle's at about 65, I think on the year, 65-35 pass to run ratio, which leads the league.
Yeah.
By at least 4 percentage points.
It's way too high. Way
too high. Okay. So knowing all of that and knowing what a strategist we have on the other side as far as their coach is concerned, Kyle Shanahan and company, Nick Sorensen on the defensive side. What are they going to expect us to do? And do we just do it? Like running into a stack box or, how committed are we going to be from the first snap to this game plan? Or do they come out similar to what they did against the Giants and see if Geno can get this thing going in the air and then kind of mix it up after that? Because if you just start running the ball from the beginning, I think the 49ers are going to be ready for that.
Well, I think you got to look at it and you got to see what are the 49ers doing, because the Giants came out with light boxes and they were daring Seattle to run the ball and they never did.
That is so true.
And if the 49ers come out with stacked boxes, they're daring Seattle to pass the ball, and they should be passing the ball at that point because they've got their run defense in, throw it.
Let me ask you this. Everyone seems to be indicating that Geno Smith has the autonomy to change plays at the line of scrimmage. Why doesn't Geno is seeing the light boxes against the Giants and changing those plays at the line of scrimmage to at least balance that thing out, so that he's kind of playing into the strengths of that offense?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if he has the ability to make those calls and to switch into running plays and he's not using it. That's a problem. That's something that needs to be addressed in the meeting rooms, in the film room, because if he's not doing that and he can, then he's not seeing the obvious, which is that they're in an obvious pass defense. And if he's switching out of run plays into pass plays against those looks, then he's hurting the team. I don't think that last part's true. I don't know how much ability he has to make those changes. I really don't. I will say that since you said that, I looked. Seattle has the most pass attempts out of any NFL team and the least rushing attempts out of any NFL team. Both of those things are true.
Yeah. And you've seen how that translates. When you talk about letting Russ cook and all that stuff in the past, it works out when you win, and it's not a great thing when you lose. And teams can identify that in as a weakness and exploit that all day long in the NFL, just because it's, if you're going to pass 65-70% of the time, that means defenses can take chances, can jump routes, can do all sorts of things to help mitigate that. And as much as it's fun to throw the ball in the NFL, you've got to have a balanced attack to keep a defense honest. And we see that work against the Seahawks quite frequently, especially if a team is successful running the ball against us, which they have been. And it was most prevalent in the Detroit game for me. Detroit ran the ball effectively, and they used play action with Jared Goff almost exclusively. So every time he dropped back, he at least faked to the running back and completed 18 straight completions.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to, and whatchamacallit from the Giants, Daniel Jones, did the same thing.
Yeah.
And so if Seattle does not adjust, they are going to face the same defensive dilemma against the 49ers that they faced the last couple games.
Yeah. And the other part of it is the Seahawks have given up the third most sacks in the entire league, despite Geno having a fairly fast, snap to throw like window. He's getting the ball out of his hands.
Getting the ball out of his hands on an average of 2.5 seconds.
Yeah.
And Brock Purdy is at 2.95 seconds. So literally half a second longer. Which
doesn't sound like that much, but that's a huge difference in the NFL.
Well, and Brock Purdy leads the league in that statistic, along with Jalen Hurts. They're essentially
the longest time holding the ball.
Yes.
Yeah. And Seattle's, that's a half second better. And yet, the Seahawks have still given up 5 more sacks on the year. It's 1 per game.
There's 8 quarterbacks in the NFL that hold the ball less time than Geno.
Really?
8. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it is interesting. Okay.
I bet you one of them is not Deshaun Watson.
That's funny. Deshaun Watson is closer to Brock Purdy, actually.
Yeah, because he has been sacked 26 times.
So let's get down to the nitty gritty here, Keith. How do you see this game playing out? Can we be closer to the team that we saw in the first 3 weeks, yes, both offensively and defensively in this game, and win this game?
Yeah, I see this game being one of where the things work in fits and starts for both teams. And so I see the Seahawks are going to get an opportunity to run the ball. They're going to do some of that, and then they're going to run into a penalty or a Bosa sack and have drives, die when it would be nice for them to score some points. And San Francisco is going to have some similar things. So you're going to have things work for a while, and then there's going to be a lag where it's going to be a game of adjustments. And I wouldn't be surprised to see one of the teams jump out, 14 points or 10 points, and then see the other team come back and take the lead. And then have another lead change. I expect this game to be close and have these big momentum swings. Ultimately, though, and in the end, San Francisco's having a hard time closing out games. They're having a hard time finishing games, and They don't have the depth that they've done in the past. I think they're, especially on defense, guys are getting tired more than we've seen in previous years. And when teams go to like 2-minute offenses and that kind of stuff against them, they're susceptible. And part of the reason they're susceptible is because teams have been running the ball a lot before then and really taking it to the 49ers and wearing their defense out. And then when you can, bring on the speed and that kind of stuff against a worn out defense, and you're seeing teams be able to score late in games. And I kind of expect Seattle to do that, to run the ball a lot early, and it's going to be close. And we may go into the fourth quarter with San Francisco having a lead, but once the Seahawks open things up a little bit, I don't think San Francisco's defense will have enough in the tank to stop Seattle and keep the Seahawks from getting the win.
Yeah, I see this kind of being that way that you mentioned, kind of back and forth and so forth. I think this can be a little bit more of a slog than Seattle is accustomed to or wants to have. But I do think that the 49ers will probably stack the box against Seattle and kind of force their hand at throwing the ball, which I think they want to try to avoid in this game. And I think that's a great strategy by Shanahan, is really just stack the box and stop the run first and foremost against us, and force Geno to throw the ball, especially if they get up a touchdown or 10 points early. It's really going to be difficult for Seattle to maintain that commitment to run the ball. And I'm very curious to see how that plays out.
If San Francisco is going to make this commitment to stack the box, I'm
not saying Geno couldn't make them pay. I'm just saying if Seattle is so committed to running the ball in this game to prove that they may run into stack boxes in order to do this, which I do not like. But that's why I'm curious to see how they play out.
If San Francisco is going to stack the box like that, and bring pressure, like DK Metcalf and JSN need to feast on that, because that means they're getting a lot of one-on-one coverage. Yeah. And you go one-on-one against DK and you're going to lose.
Well, I think, what the reason I'm saying that is I think that Seattle has shown over the last couple of games that they can't necessarily beat you with the arm of Geno Smith alone. And they need to have the running backs and chew up some of that clock, because their defense is giving up yards. And if I was Shanahan, I'd be stacking the box, because I would want that running game to be non-existent for Seattle and to frustrate them, and have essentially the game plan that's played out for Seattle in the last two games be what happens, and then trust my offense to score points against Seattle's defense. That would be my plan, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that.
Seattle needs to overcome that. Seattle needs to overcome. I can see that.
The problem that I see, the problem that I have with that is, it's not that the Seahawks couldn't win on the arm of Geno Smith. It's that they tried to win on the arm of Geno Smith against like a Giants team that was daring Seattle to run the ball with the way that they were schemed out. And they had two defensive linemen in. Just, that's it. And Seattle didn't run against that. They tried to throw against that. And that's the kind of, that's how you get beat. If they had, if it was a stacked box and they were trying to run against it, that would be a problem. But if it's a stacked box and you're going to throw the ball 30 times because 49ers are daring you to throw the ball because they're just loading up to stop the run, then throw the ball. Do it. I mean, if it's one, I mean, they couldn't win on the arm of Geno Smith because the Giants were doing everything they could to take that away from Seattle, and Seattle never pivoted to the running game and got Walker involved. Whereas if they'd looked at what was going on and handed the ball off a few times and forced the Giants to adapt, to adjust, and not get gashed up, in the running game, it would have opened things up for Geno. And so you need to be able to make that distinction. And I don't understand why Seattle never went to the running game in this last game. I get that they were behind and all of that, but there's plenty of time, and you got to be able to dictate, coverages and that kind of stuff by running the football when they're not putting in any run stuffers and they've got 2 defensive linemen on the field.
Yeah, Seattle leads the league in a bad stat, which is throwing above expected average. They are number 1 in the league, and that just shows that they're out of whack a little bit. And they need to, and Watson is the only is in second place, and he's 3.5 points behind that.
Yeah, so I just look at that, and to me, that's a Grubb problem. He needs to fix that.
Yes.
And it's not a matter of, we have to run the ball more, so we're going to run it against stacked boxes. It's we have to run the ball more, so we're going to run it when it's obviously in our favor to do so, when they don't have anybody in the box at all. And the Giants, the Giants gave them those opportunities to run the football and do it effectively because they didn't have anyone in the box. And Seattle chose not to do so. That was the problem.
Prediction time, Keith.
I think Seattle wins 23-24.
Wow.
I know that score is a repeat of the Arizona San Francisco game this last weekend. That was not unintentional. I think that if Seattle wins 23-24, 4 days after Arizona won over San Francisco 23-24, that it would just be like stabbing them and twisting the knife to the 49ers. And I freaking love that. So wishful thinking there.
I went out and looked at 10, 12 different personalities that predicted this score in this game. And they all range on a high of 27 and a low of 17. And most of the score predictions are bunched, just like yours is. 24-21, 27-24, 24-20, etc. So I'm going to be right in there because this is the NFL, and that's where these games are going to live. And that's where I think this game ends up being. Although you could argue that one team could just scurry out and really blow this thing out, but I don't see that. I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to score 27 points in this game. Their offense is going to come together better. They're going to have a more well-balanced attack, and they'll figure it out. And there's probably a turnover in store in this game against the 49ers. And I think that's the difference in the end. So I've got it 27-20.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's 7 points is a big difference for the NFL. It's a big difference. It is a big difference.
But Seattle's got the ability to really take this game. And it's all going to be between the ears for me in this team because they didn't have a chance to really practice. Mike McDonald's, got to go in and either yell at them or console them or hold their hand or make them feel like crap. Whatever motivation factor he knows that this team will respond to, he needs to have done that and have this team ready to go tomorrow. And they just go out and play football. The way that they've practiced and the way they executed in the first few games, and then let the cards fall where they may. And that's what's going to happen. So we'll see. It should be a good game. Wipe out that Giants game, wipe out the Lions game. This is a completely new game, standalone. Both teams want to be successful. I think both teams end up doing certain things well. And if the trend continues, I think 49ers fall away down the stretch, and that's where Seattle seems to excel, is continuing to score and continuing to put pressure on. And they do that fairly well in the fourth quarter, regardless of the opponent this year. And so I see that continuing and being the difference in this game.
Cool.
All right. So we'll come back after Thursday, and either Friday or Saturday morning, we'll record a recap show and offer some reactions, and hopefully it's on the positive side, because I don't want this game, this season, to get away, which could happen with a couple of stacked losses in a row, and you have 2-3 losses in a row, and things kind of don't feel the same anymore. So a win would be great on Thursday night. So let's go get it. So follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can follow me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel. And when you find it, hit that subscribe button. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.